I'm gonna show you something that may not seem like a big deal, but it may be something where I can save you some headaches and potentially wrist aches from TIG welding. We talk a lot about welding on this channel, but some of the more important stuff that we can talk about is actually with our setup, and especially in this episode, and things you may have set up in a certain way around your table. I've been in production TIG welding for about 20 years now or so, and there's definitely been a few things I wish I could have done without. The first thing I wish I could do without is problems with my gear. Over the years, I have popped so many holes in water lines and gas lines, but the second thing I probably wish I could have done without over my career is injury. I once had a pretty serious wrist injury that slowly crept up after about 3 months or so when I first got started with TIG welding. This honestly probably took close to a year to have healed and fully taken care of, but it's still something to this day that creeps back and bothers me once in a while. But I wish I could have gone back in time, if that's possible, and told myself that there's actually a few things I could have done to prevent this from happening. So today, let's go over one of the biggest things that may not seem like a big deal to you, but it can definitely cause you some headaches and pain down the road if you don't take care of it. Take a look at my torch here. When people get set up to weld, they will most likely just drag their torch over to the table and have it hung around their table like so. This is gonna do a few things. The first thing I want you to take a look at is the way the torch lead is hanging from the table as I hold the torch like so. Here is the big problem that this can cause. When we let the weight of a torch hang from the lead like so, we are gonna put pressure here. It may not seem like a big deal, but over time, and especially over a lot of welding, when this thing is heating up and cooling down rapidly, this is gonna become a big problem. If you have a water-cooled unit like I do here, this is gonna pull on the fittings at the base of the torch. Over time, like I said, as things heat up and cool down, these fittings can slowly become loose, and you can end up obviously with a pretty serious water leak. As you can see here, you can see the braiding of the hoses is now making contact with the edge of the torch handle on the inside. Over time, this can cause the braiding on these lines to start to fray, which will expose the line on the inside. If you wear a hole in one of these lines on the inside, there is no repairing it. One thing that I do like to do, not a lot of people like doing this, but this is what I prefer to do. I like to have the sheath pulled back from my torch handle an inch or 2 inches or so. The downside to doing this is it does expose the lines a little bit, which obviously is a hazard in case they get melted by something hot. But if you are careful, as well as following some of the things I recommend in the next tip, you probably can be pretty careful to avoid that from happening. The reason that I like having it pulled back a little bit is this is gonna show me if I ever have a water leak right away. If you have the sheath pulled all the way up to the butt of the torch, if you for some reason begin to develop a water leak, you won't be able to see it. You could be leaking down the torch lead for who knows how long before you actually realize you have a leak, and then everything on the inside of your torch is gonna be soaked. Good luck finding that leak. If you have an air-cooled or gas-cooled torch, here's something that can happen that's even worse. The problem with that is you're not gonna see any evidence at all of anything leaking. If you wear a hole through this like we talked about, you're gonna have a gas leak. This is initially gonna start to cause some slight problems with your welds. You may have no idea what's going on. A lot of people think it's problems with their torch setup or their gas screens, cup, whatever, but it's actually something way deeper when you're actually leaking in your gas line inside your torch. You can't see it. You'll have no way of knowing. Having a gas leak is incredibly frustrating. To do a leak test of your entire setup is extremely time consuming. So obviously forming a gas leak is going to be a really big and annoying problem. So this leads us to the second problem that can come up from having this kind of strain on our torch. And unfortunately, this strain also transfers over to our wrists. When I've been in the best shape of my life, obviously like I am right now, when I'm production welding all day, 10-hour shifts or whatever, even the slightest strain on my wrist, when I'm trying to do manipulations of torch and filler rod, it adds up pretty quickly, especially if you're using a water-cooled line. This is absolutely heavier than an air-cooled or gas-cooled line. Like I said, this adds up over time. Having the entire thing hang from your hand all the way down to the floor is obviously gonna make things heavier than they need to be. And believe me, if you've never TIG welded before and you go through a few months of TIG welding production, these small things will creep up on you. So whether it's an equipment malfunction or a slow building wrist injury or something like that, these are problems that I still see to this day that happen with a lot of production welders. So what do you say we eliminate this from happening to you? What I propose is this. You're gonna pick up your torch and loop it over a hook or something like that, just like I am here. You can see here, I don't have a fancy torch holder or anything like that. It's a clamp. You can use a clamp. You can buy a fancy torch holder. Shout out to Brad at Hourglass Ingenuity. This guy makes awesome stuff to hang your torch with. I should probably get something like that. But for now, I got a clamp. You can use a clamp, you can use a pair of vice grips, whatever you got. What we're gonna do by doing this is eliminate almost half of the weight hanging off the end of your torch. You can hang your torch like so, which will take all of the weight off the end of your torch. We won't have anything pulling the hoses directly against the torch body, which will inevitably cause wear over months or years. Because it is much lighter now, even when we're holding the torch like this, we won't have nearly as much weight on it. This will reduce the amount of pressure or wear over the years that our hoses will have to endure. If more weight was pulling on it over the months or the years, that's not gonna last. Look at how I'm manipulating my torch here. Obviously this is exaggerated a little bit, and you can see that the hoses are indeed making contact with the torch body. This is still going to create friction over time, but because it is much lighter now, whether this is a gas-cooled torch or a water-cooled torch, this is going to be much easier for our wrists to manipulate over a long period of time. Now, if you have fancy cups like I do, one thing that will always hurt a grown welder's feelings is dropping your torch and breaking your cups on the floor. As we loop our torch lead around a hook or a clamp or something like this, look at what else it's going to help you out with here. Let's say I'm being a clumsy ding-dong working away in my studio here, and I accidentally drop my torch. Look at that. It catches it before it hits the floor. Obviously, we won't have as much table reach as we once would have, so obviously for a bigger table, that's not gonna work. But for a little table where I'm teaching someone or doing some demos or whatever here, it's gonna be just fine. And for a lot of production welders who work right in front of them, this is gonna save you some cups. These are some of these small things that may not seem like they're that important, but when you weigh the options of what's at stake here, whether it's breaking your stuff, preventing leaks in something, or most importantly, our physical health, this is actually something that's very important for me when I get set up for a long production run on some kind of heavy welding at my table. I get set up to do things where I will be working in my table in one position only, sometimes for months on end. After dealing with injury and all kinds of broken gear, this is one subtle thing that's helped me out a lot over the years. Try this out for yourself and go out today and do a random act of kindness for a stranger. Spread some positivity in the world. If you're an arc head who watches the show every week, leave a dime in the comments below. I love seeing those. For Pacific Arc TIG Welding, my name is Dusty. Fill and chill. We'll talk soon. Peace.